So what exactly is a linked list? Let's go back to my spreadsheet to explain this.
This is how we can think of an array. An array of 5 elements is like a row of spreadsheet cells. Each cell represents a chunk of memory sufficient to hold a single element of a certain type, say 4 bytes of memory per integer, or however many bytes of memory are needed per struct. Before I add any elements to my array, I have to allocate enough memory to hold a fixed number of data items. Each chunk of memory for each item in the array starts where the previous chunk of memory ends, with one element following the next. But a linked list isn't like that at all. With a linked list, I don't allocate a fixed block of memory in advance. Instead, I allocate memory on an element-by-element basis. If I create a list that contains 2 elements, I allocate just enough memory to hold 2 elements. If I now want to add a third element to the list, I allocate another chunk of memory for that new element and then add it to my list. But since I'm adding and maybe deleting elements at various different points of my program, their locations in memory are likely to be all over the place. They don't occupy a single sequential block of memory like an array, so I just can't iterate through them through the memory by counting along a certain number of bytes as I did when using pointer arithmetic or by using array indexing with square brackets.
How then does element 1 in my list know where element 2 can be found? The answer is that it keeps a pointer to element 2. The pointer stores element 2's address. So if I know where element 1 is, I can use the pointer in element 1 to find element 2. From element 2, I can use a pointer to find element 3, and so on. That's a bit like having non-adjacent cells in a spreadsheet. In a spreadsheet, I can access another cell, for example, if I'm writing a formula to do a calculation, by using its location. That is, the address of the cell in the spreadsheet.
For example, in my spreadsheet, the integer 2 that you can see here is stored at the address B3. And I can enter the address to go to that cell. And you can see it's moved the highlight. This double-lined square shows the cell that's currently active is the cell at B3. And that's kind of how a linked list works in C. Except in C, a struct in a list can contain both its data, say an integer, and a pointer that gives the address of the next struct in the list. Element 1 might be a struct that contains a pointer to element 2. Element 2 has a pointer to element 3, and so on. And let's now look at some C code to see how this can be done in a program.